Welcome back to Heart with me, Shakti Sundari. We're here today with Nick Clements. Nick is a friend of mine and somebody I really regard very highly. He's a published author. He's written many books on modern masculinity. He's a professor of community arts. He's done so much work, not just with men, but now more recently men and women around authentic relationship. And he's also a stand-up comedian.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Nick.
Thank you. Welcome to Stroud.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here in your home. So we were just talking about how there's, because you've got such a rich background, you know, you've done so much. I'd love to ask you about your men's work before we go on to talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, really, the journey starts with your own father, as ever. And what I've always been fascinated by is male role models. Very early on, when I was 18, I worked in a children's home, and I was a male role model for those young kids, particularly for boys. And I found that very difficult because I didn't have my own internal kind of compass as to what is a good male role model. And it's been a long journey trying to find that. Still on that journey.
So did you have a good? Was your father around for you?
My father was present, but he was a very violent man. He was an alcoholic, so he was a very loving man. But he was also, there was a kind of edge to that relationship and that love. And I always say I owe him a huge debt because he showed me what not to be. And we had many a discussion around that aspect of it. But he was beautiful, loving man. Yeah.
I love hearing you say that, because I guess I and many others might expect hearing you say he was an alcoholic and there was violence. To hear a story of something else, maybe resentment or maybe pain or...
Yeah, there used to be, but my father died about 15 years ago, and we came to a place, before he died, we certainly came to a place of understanding. And yeah, I have a lot of love for him. I appreciate him more and more. The older I become, the more I appreciate who he was.
So you said you were working in a children's home at the age of 18.
Yeah.
It's really young to be in that kind of a setup.
Yeah.
And,
I was working as an assistant, social worker assistant, and I lived with the kids for 3 years. We lived directly in the children's home. And we're still in contact. 40 odd years later, I'm still in contact with some of the social workers and some of the kids who are now grandparents. And so there's this amazing bond and connection between us. And I always say there was a moment when I was feeling very sorry for some of the boys, for their stories, for their domestic violence stories. And we were talking about that. And they turned to me and they said, but you're a victim too, mate. And that was the first time I realised that I was a victim to that kind of violence. Because it was so part of my life, I never really thought of it in that way. And they said, you're one of us. That's why we love you. And it's a very, it's a hugely strong bond which has connected me to those people for over 40 years now, which gives me a huge amount of pleasure to be part of that.
So you were saying that you were a role model, but you didn't feel ready for that, or like you really understood what it was to be in your true masculinity.
You kind of idealize it, you want the hero to be the hero, and come riding in on his horse at the right moment, and know the right words to say, the right things to do. I certainly didn't, and I still don't. But I have an inkling as to, who I am. That's all I'm looking at really now. Yeah.
So what's your journey as a man and with your relationship with masculinity? What's that been?
It's been around, creating a precedent for other people. So a lot of people say that I'm always on the edge of things. I'm always interested in the cutting edge of things, and so my relationship to masculinity has always been to look at where can we take it next. My father's generation, in many ways, had it very simple. Their idea of masculinity was very simple, and it's confused now. A lot of men are confused, and that's a fabulously wonderful place to be, because with that certainty came a certain amount of fixedness and a certain amount of warrior behaviour. What I'm looking at, and my kids are great examples of it, of much more flexibility in our own masculinity, and not saying you've got to be strong, you've got to be tough, you've got to do all of these different parts to being a man. No, you don't. I've just written a letter to my grandson who's 2 weeks old, and I said, cry. When you need to cry, please cry. Please don't cover the tears when they cry. Please, from that as a starting point, we don't need that anymore at all, any of that. So yeah, there's a huge shift happening with masculinity and men, and I'm very happy to be a part of that. And there's some wonderful people doing wonderful work. Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the story of the Alpha Wolf, which is one of your books, Tale About the Modern Male. Is it autobiographical?
Some people have said that. It's a novel. It's fiction. And I always say it's fiction very quickly, because he's a misogynist and he's a womanizer and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But again, I've had a lot of mates, a lot of friends who are like that. The one who I modelled most of it on doesn't recognise himself, which is wonderful. I find very funny, is that he kind of goes, God, he's a bit of a bastard, isn't he? And I was going, yeah, I guess he was, wasn't he, really? Love him. Yeah. And what is the Alpha Wolf? The Alpha Wolf listens. One of the things about the book is that we're saying the Alpha Wolf listens, is vulnerable, is supportive, is all of those collaborative things, as well as a pioneer, as well as at the cutting edge. And there's those two aspects to us which are so important. The nurturer, and we need men who are nurturers, and also we need women who are pioneers. And that's what we're getting now, is we're getting that confusion, in inverted commas. But I love it. I think it's wonderful.
It's a very different way of speaking about it, because I've heard a lot of men, in these explorations, sort of saying, oh gosh, we're confused, we don't know what to be, we don't know whether to be hard, to be soft, to be the leader, to be the follower, to be the nurturer, the giver. It's all, we don't know what we're supposed to be anymore.
Great, fantastic. All of them, all at the same time. All at the same time, and make mistakes. Make mistakes, because that's how you get to learn. When I become the leader and I lead us in the wrong direction, that's the message I get, and I have to step back and I have to say, I made a mistake, sorry. That's a masculine approach, and it does tie into that concept of the hero's journey, which I've been working on for a long time.
Tell us about that. What's the hero's journey?
Stephen Hillman wrote a piece about this idea that the male has to conquer. The male has, in the hero journey, it's what the video game players, the devisers rather, programmers stole, is the hero's journey. So video games are the hero's journey. You conquer the enemy by wearing armor, by armoring yourself up against and you fight it, and you battle with it, and then you overcome it. That's the hero's journey. And it's a very lovely, wonderful warrior kind of thing to do. And I'm not denying its potency. But what I'm saying is that's only a half the story of what it is to be a whole human being. And I think it's really important that we become whole human beings, not just the hero. We also need the heroine. So for me, the heroine's journey is the opposite. The heroine's journey is Anana, and it's about this idea of assimilating the enemy. So when you confront the enemy, the monster, you allow the monster to eat you. Absolutely. Without any resistance. And by doing so, you assimilate the monster. You take it inside yourself and you become it. Do you see? It's so beautiful. It's not about conquest, but it is. You win on both levels. You know, you win if you take up armor and defend yourself, and you also win if you go, okay, I'm okay with it. And those two journeys are vital for every individual.
I was going to say, so you're not equating the hero's journey with men and the heroine's journey with women?
No.
No.
And I'm saying the two are potent. You know, they have to be part of the journey for each individual. And by doing both journeys, you know, you become a whole human being. And that's my interest, is in whole human, you know, as you say, bringing men and women together to become whole human beings, not men and women. No, they just become whole human beings. And that's vital part of the process.
So you worked with men though for many years, right?
Yeah.
Running men's groups.
Yeah.
Curious to know a little bit from that time. I mean, again, you were pioneering in what you were doing, and what sorts of challenges or issues you were holding space for in that time.
Yeah, a huge amount. I mean, like you say, a lot of confusion and a lot of anger. A lot of men who are angry with their fathers, you know, angry with the previous generation, of not getting what they needed. You know, so many conversations had around the fact that their fathers didn't give them what they needed, what they think they need. You know, and I would say, look, you know, my dad gave me what I needed. Absolutely. You know, and I respect him for what he gave me, because he couldn't give me anything else. And it's ridiculous for me to assume that my father would change. You know, it's not my responsibility to change my father. It's not my responsibility. My only responsibility to my father is to love him and to acknowledge that he was in my life and still is a very powerful person in my life. And that's part, you know, that's for me the really important part of the men's work, was to get men to soften up around their anger and hatred and violence and all those kind of things. You know, I always say I went to a big men's conference in the 90s in Brighton, and before the conference started, 60 men went in the room and started playing drums, you know, djembes. The noise was like, you know, you could hear it about 5 miles away. And I was going, at the end of that process, you know, a lot of the men went, wow, that was great, you know, that was lovely. And I said, no, okay, I get what you did. Now I want you to cry. I want you to cry as loudly as you did the drumming, because I want you to grieve as well as celebrate. You know, because a lot of men need to just cry. You know, it's so important, this phrase, you know, men don't cry. Men don't cry has meant war, you know, has literally created warfare. And we have to work with men to look at their grief and to say, get it out in whatever way, shape or form. And, you know, banging a djembe is a process of grief. I get that. But also crying is so important, just so important.
You might already have articulated this, but what is the primary source of this grief?
The primary source of this grief is that we were born, you know, that we incarnated, really. You know, that for me is my grief, you know, because I stepped away from the Creator at that point. You know, in spirit, I stepped out of spirit and became in physical reality. And to be in the physical realm means to grieve, you know, because I grieve what was before and I grieve what is to come. And yeah, you know, being alive is the most difficult thing ever in the world, isn't it? You know, it's the most difficult thing to do. And it's a wonderful journey, but at the same time it's full of grief, because we're stepping into the unknown, absolutely. And I, as a warrior, I love the fact, I'm covered in tattoos. I'm a warrior, I've absolutely loved being a warrior, and a lot of people know me as a warrior, as someone at the edge of things. But also now, because I have Parkinson's, I now have a different journey to take. When we're looking at the hero and the heroine's journey, I'm now on the heroine's part, very definitely, by being wounded, by having a hugely painful wound, which stops me from doing the things that I used to do. And that's a powerful, powerful play. That's my lesson now, right now. Step into the wounded warrior, step into it. Get the fact that you're no longer who you used to be. So who are you? God alone knows. But yeah. So it's the combination of those two journeys is vital for the creation of a whole human being. And when we create a whole human being, we actually step beyond gender. So for me, the whole human being really is not gendered in that sense. The whole human being can access his internal female, his internal male, her internal male, her internal female. There's this mixing pot that we become, the alchemy of gender.
How does that work when two people are relating, one's a woman and one's a man, in terms of energetic polarity? I guess I'm so steeped in tantric training where it's very much about polarity. It doesn't matter who's embodying it, but there's a sense of playing with two kind of polar energies, masculine and feminine energies. So how would that work with this theory of
I play with four. I play with four genders rather than two, because I just think two is such a binary system that causes a lot of pain. So for me, there's four genders, and there's male, male, and female, female. So those two, and they're what we're talking about, the maleness and the femaleness. And then there's a journey, there's a spiral, there's a circle. So the male, male is here, and the female, female is there. And then there's male, female, and female, male. So there's this journey that you can do. So you can become more male, but also female, or more female, but also male. And there's a journey that every one of us does to visit all those four places. Because so many women I work with want to contact their inner male. And absolutely, this is the way that you can. If you say it's not a binary system, it's actually four possibilities. And it's so much easier to look at yourself with compassion and other people with compassion. It's not about being gay or being lesbian or anything like that. It's just being a human being, and the whole human being has a female aspect and a male aspect. As Robert Bly would talk, internal male and internal king and internal queen. Absolutely.
How does this express in the workshops you've been doing recently around relationships? You're offering some work in this field.
It's said so often, very, very simply. In order to love someone else, you need to love yourself. How many times have you seen that on, Facebook or wherever? In order to love someone else, you need to love yourself. In order to understand yourself, that's what I'm talking about, because you have to understand the four genders are within you before you can then go imposing them on other people and saying, this is who I am, this is who you are. And for me, what I'm encouraging people to think about is, your own sexual and sensual relationship to yourself. To be content with who you are, and to really get that it's the barriers of personality which are stopping you from joining in a relationship. Your barriers, not the other person's. You know, what I try to talk about is this, you know, that it is not someone else's fault, any of it. It's all to do with you, and it's all good stuff. Ha ha!
Yeah. So, say for example, I wanted to connect more with my masculine. Then.
Yeah.
So, what would you suggest?
I would suggest that a lot of what I would say is, okay, in order to get there, you need to go through the mediums of the other two houses, the male, female, and the female, male. So there's an easing. You know, it's not very easy to make a jump from the male, male to the female, female, or from the female, female to the male, male. There's the mediums of the in-between houses. So I would challenge you to wear different clothing. Okay. I would challenge you to look at people differently. You know, that maybe a lot of men that I work with, you know, say they fancy women. And I'm going, okay, so go on the tube and have a look at men. And get beyond, oh, I'm heterosexual and, you know, I don't, get beyond all of that.
Okay.
Get
so
beyond
you're really
that.
Challenging all of the conditionings, all of that.
Yeah.
Going way beyond that.
Because, you know, go on the tube and fancy a man, and then look at the aspects of that man that you really like. You know, it's like I saw someone the other day and they said, you know, George Clooney doesn't count, you know, because he's so gorgeous, he's so good looking anyway. But, you know, it's like, look at the aspects of that person properly. Stop judging everything. You know, stop judging sexuality, sensuality, all of those things. Get with the program. The program is in order to be happy and in love with yourself. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of work needs to be done. A lot of work.
So then in the workshops that you're running and maybe sessions that you're doing with people around relationship, what are you finding most powerful or most useful for the people in the room?
To listen. I think most people have forgotten how to listen. Really, a lot of people have forgotten how to listen, and to listen properly, truthfully, to the other person, and to acknowledge them, to honour them, to really honour them for who they are. You know, that for me is where the healing happens, is to be heard. You know, to be really heard by somebody else. And that's about all that needs to happen. You know, and that heals the person who's hearing as well as the person who's being heard. But really listen to someone. You know, like what we encourage people to do in the workshops is to really listen. Yeah.
How do you support that or encourage that if it's kind of a new skill? You know, people say, oh yeah, I listen. Yeah, of course I listen.
saying, hey, I've just listened to you. Yeah, no problem. What did you say? What did you say? Can't remember.
So what is needed to really listen?
What is needed, I guess, is I mean, for me, everything comes back to breath. You know, the breath, the in and out breath. You know, so a lot of people I talk to, you know, the in and out breath is listening and being listened. So draw in someone else listening to you, and draw out listening to someone. Get that, you know, how blissful that feels. You know, because it's everything has to be non-judgmental for me. You know, we have to come back to that, and I'm encouraging people just to listen, and to hold space. And yeah, like you say, people go, I can do that. That's, you know, simple. It's like when you do mindfulness. You know, people go, it's easy, mindfulness, no problem. Nah, it's really, really difficult, especially for me. You know, most especially for me. Because the monkey mind is there all the time. And yeah, really trying to get to that place with other people. You know, that's the lovely thing with group process, is when people are really listening, then it's a healing for everybody within that group. That's wonderful. That's lovely. Great stuff. But yeah, you know, in a relationship, one-to-one people, you know, I just say, listen. We did a program, and this one person came back, and he said, he was so sweet, and he said, do you know something? She actually makes quite a lot of sense. And they've been together about 25 years, you know, like, and it was the first time he'd actually listened to her. And he was going, God, she's actually quite sensible. Oh, okay. I can hear you. I can hear you now.
So what is it that gets in the way?
It's for a lot of people, it's wanting to help people, you know, to be of assistance. You know, one of my great teachers used to say, you know, you're in the kitchen. The conversation, you know, in the party comes around the dogs, and you've got a great, funny dog story, you know, which you know is a killer, and it's great and it's brilliant and wonderful, and you've said it loads of times. Don't say it. Listen. Listen to other people's stories about dogs. Stop imposing. Do you see it? Because you're not listening to anything else, because you're going, how can I get my story in? Oh, quick, I'm going to get my story in quick now because it's so good. Listen. Don't tell it. See what story rises then. You know, what story underneath that one that comes up. That's a good story. Yeah.
I get that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. What is it that you really feel called to share with the world now? You know, you've been through so much, you've created so much, you're still on the cutting edge. You're in a new phase, you're dealing with some health issues.
Yeah.
What is it now for you?
What, the message? Wow. Don't assume you know anything. You know, the older I get, the less I know, definitely. And enjoy the moment. You know, just to have some joy, you know, because for me, the illness and stuff has made me very serious, you know, and it really challenges me. It really challenges my ability to be me. And it made me very angry. I'm very upset and all of those things. And I'm slowly getting to this point where I can assimilate, you know, this whole assimilation process of the pain and the shadow aspect. Where, you know, what the message I have, I guess, is that we're at an incredible turning point in the world, you know, and every generation has always said that, but I think we can safely say that about this one. And I wanna leave some legacy. You know, suddenly I've got a grandson, and suddenly I'm thinking, yeah, I need to leave some legacy here. You know, about I tried to make a difference. I did try. And that's all we can ask. And, you know, I failed miserably. And I've also succeeded hugely. And the two taste the same, really, you know. But yeah, to try and give something, a message of hope, because there's so many people who are just saying, you know, the world's in a terrible place. It's awful, you know, it's disaster, it's apocalypse now. And I'm thinking, no, you know, let's hope.
So, for example, in the letter, I mean, they don't ask you to reveal anything that's really personal, but just thinking you have a grandson and then thinking about the next generation of young men, boys, to everyone who's a parent or an auntie or a teacher who's in that position of being a role model and being there for the next generation, what would you want them to take into account?
Love them. I just see it as a peeling process, peeling the onion. That I peeled a few skins. That's what I spent my life doing, peeling a few skins from the onion. And they've got a few skins to peel. But it gives me so much hope when I work with young people now, and their attitude towards themselves, let alone other people, is hugely important and encouraging. And there's hope. There's always hope. And I love the fact that my children take, what was weird 20 years ago is now kind of mainstream. And that's an interesting process, isn't it? That 20 years ago I would have been locked up for saying some of the things that I say now. But now it's kind of commonplace. That's lovely. Things do change, and individuals can make a difference. As individuals we can make a huge difference. And that's, that's all we can ask.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for all that you've shared and all that you do, and all that you've done for men, for women, and for the future as well, the legacy.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you so much for watching. Join me again next time on Heart to Heart with me, Shakti.